Hello and welcome to our series about how to build an inclusive, fun, and high-performing workplace. That's a hell of a title, don't you agree, Eva?
Yes, but it has everything in it.
Exactly. Eva and I got together because we are both passionate about creating a workplace and environments where people can feel like they belong, they are empowered, and their voice are being heard. Likewise, manager has the freedom to direct the teams and kind of continue to foster this aspect and environments of team culture and building play and fun. And as such, as part of our series, we will look at the following thoughts that we'll be discussing over the next 6 videos or so. We'll start with diversity and stereotypes and what has it got to do within the global culture. We then jump into the world of discovering all the different personality types and how rich and how enriching it is even for your workplace. We then look at empathy, especially right now when a lot more people are working remotely. Especially when looking at remote working as well, leadership, how difficult or how different it is to lead a team when you are working from home. We'll then have a bit of fun and looking at the plate mindset, what it is and how it contributes to a fun and high-performing workplace as well. And we'll finish our series by looking at agility. What does it mean? We're not going to be talking about standing on one toe, on one foot, but it's a really core and important aspect of what is happening right now and how your business can continue to be productive and grow in many, many years to come from now as well. I'm Naili Makangu. I'm the Mary Poppins of business. I'm also known as the founder of Athena Leaders, a management and leadership consultancy that sweep away your challenges to create happy, high-performing teams. Solving your problems, whether it's project management, interim management, or culture transformation, that's not a problem for us. We know we'll do that. But what we are passionate about is leaving a legacy so that once we're gone, your people would have learned how to work well together, how to enjoy coming to work, regardless of the challenges and the situation you are in, and how leaders can grow and empower the teams to have a voice within your organization.
Thank you, Naili, for this brilliant introduction and also for introducing yourself to us. My name is Eva Tarabichi, and as an intercultural consultant, trainer, and ICF certified coach, I support my clients so that they can achieve worldwide success. It's really my mission to enable diverse teams to enrich each other and to overcome intercultural barriers and misunderstandings and conflict, and to simply go much further together by creating a common and diverse, inclusive culture than they could if they stick to their individual cultural blocks and mindsets. So that's what I'm all about, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Naili.
Oh, likewise, I'm definitely looking forward to diving even more into this intercultural world, which is really important for us. And I guess as part of the first video, is what we are going to talk about today is diversity and stereotypes within a global culture.
Exactly.
Now, before we dive into that, if you are already spiked and interested and want to follow us and be updated whenever new videos comes as part of this series, make sure that you subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification so that you know when we've got new videos. Now, throughout the series, we will talk about the global culture. And so what I'm going to do now is kind of frame it a little bit so that you understand what we are referring to.
Exactly.
Many people, when they hear about global culture, will think about companies that have offices around the world. However, the landscape of global culture or global workplace has changed. Even a small company, for example, in Cambridge, which is a multicultural town, can have more than 10 nationalities, right? I've worked in similar companies where you have to work with teammates that have different backgrounds and that also bring a lot of richness in the company. And I've had roles where I was the head of a product of a team where we were working with an offshore team in Vietnam. So we already had to juggle our internal culture and also the culture of the other teams as well. So this is really, really exciting, and it also comes with a lot of challenges as well, that as managers and team member you need to know. So Eva, what is the biggest challenge when it comes to diversity in a workplace?
That's a very good question, Naili, because it's also the question of where do we start, right? Yeah. Now the world is getting more diverse and the workforces are, and so what do we have to do? Yeah. What is this challenge that we're facing? And in my experience from working with my clients, it is that many organizations are a bit stuck on how they designed or why they have their diversity policies or which diversity paradigm they're following. So diversity was introduced a bit top-bottom approachy, I would say. And so the first diversity policies that existed had a very noble intention, which was to create fair hiring processes and really bring everybody into the workforce, but they don't go much further. They expected assimilation. So we call this the assimilation diversity paradigm. And in this paradigm, new people get access to jobs in organizations. So that's great. A mix is happening, but it's not really going very deep. These people are basically seen as people that are now given opportunities. So it's also a bit of an arrogant approach, even if it doesn't want to be, even if the initial intention is good, but that's what it is. And so what happens is that it's very hard to retain diverse talent because people obviously don't feel that appreciated, you know, if the approach is kind of like, be thankful that you are here, right? And there is no real mixing of competencies, and the minorities basically have to just accept the way things were handled before by the existing majority in the organization. And so that also deprives the majority of learning from the new colleagues, you know, and accepting new perspectives.
Definitely, especially when you start talking about, especially within the assimilation paradigm, one thing that I like to stress is well, the first part was kind of having people come in your company, but not making use of all of the assets that they can bring to enrich your company by having a different vision. Yes. And that then raised the second question, retention policy, that you've also mentioned, right? So you spend all this money in recruitment, and that can be quite a lot of money to bring people on board. And it's well known that it takes a few weeks to a few months, depending on the role, for someone to fully jump in a role and be quasi independent. Yeah. Now, so if you think in terms of the money that you've spent, you invested on that person to bring them in and to give them the training, but you're not getting the return of investment, even if it's not a good way of describing people. But you are, from a business perspective, you're actually losing money by simply not putting the effort into allowing the person to flourish within your organization as well.
And in this paradigm, you're exactly right, Naili. And what comes on top is that it's very hard to keep everybody convinced of the idea of diversity, because since the minorities, the new women and people with different ethnic backgrounds and different physical abilities, since they can't blossom, since they can't bring in their perspectives and their experiences, then of course the majority that already exists starts to question, so what are they actually bringing? Yes. You know, and that is also very hard, and it can turn into very negative thoughts and even conflicts. Yes, so that is a paradigm that exists in still many cases, and that needs to shift. Another one that is similarly negative, actually, in the outcomes is the differentiation paradigm. So here we focus on the differences. Suddenly we don't say, oh, we're all the same, like in the first one. We say, well, we celebrate the differences. And while that sounds amazing and is also part of a good approach, it's not the entire thing. Because what happens here is that a firm would hire, for example, to enlarge their outreach in the Hispanic community. They want more market access there. They would hire people with Hispanic backgrounds, for example, and they would put them to work in that niche market. So basically what they're doing is pigeonholing them. For these employees, the message is quite clear. You're hired for this specific market, and there are no chances of you ever rising up the ladder in the rest of the firm. We just want you for this. And for the firm, the disadvantage is that these people obviously have specific knowledge. That's why they were hired for this market, but the firm will not learn any of this knowledge. Nobody who's not an Hispanic employee will actually learn. So when they leave the company one day, the firm is back to square one.
Exactly.
Stripped of that market again. So what really has to happen, and where I help direct the company policies of my clients to, is to create what is called an integration policy, an integration paradigm. And that puts basically the first two together and then manages to go further. So of course we need equal hiring, equal opportunities, but we can't expect people, and we don't want to expect people to assimilate. So then we add the celebration of the differences. And we say, okay, so you do bring different perspectives, and you do bring different experiences. And we start an open conversation with everybody at the table, and we admit that everybody has to learn from everybody. It's not just because a culture existed that it's better and that everybody has to get used to it.
Exactly.
You have to really reshuffle your culture.
But that's quite a challenge, as you said. Is you need to reshuffle the culture, but it goes way beyond that as well. Is the mindset of leaders within the company, so that they can drive the team members to understand the benefits of why they need to go with this approach of bringing people together and really start discussing how we want to move forward.
Yes, it's exactly that. And maybe we can make it more concrete. I remember when we prepped our little conversation today, you told me about an example that you had actually experienced in the workplace, where different cultures came to play. And maybe you can just illustrate this a bit.
Yeah, definitely. That was a great story. And it's also a good example of when you start thinking about the integration paradigm and how what the importance of understanding people culture. And I found that for me, in my personal experiences, is coming very, very handy whenever I have to deal with difficult situation or difficult conversation and challenges. So I was working on an assignment, and the project was, oh my God, it was just going, it was going wrong. That's to put it mildly, really. And there was a problem between how my team looking at the client's team, saying, oh my God, he asked for so many things. The main stakeholder keeps on changing his mind. Whenever we think that we are moving forward and getting ready, things changes a lot. And obviously, as within every project, whenever, especially when you're working with a tight deadline and you have to move very quickly, the changing pace or the changing landscape does have an impact on the morale of the teams on both sides, on the supplier side as well as on the client side. So when I joined the teams, obviously what I love to do is, I jump in and start sorting things out, but I love to get to know the people, not just what I hear about them, but really build a relationship. Now, what I found is that the main stakeholder was Spanish. And whenever I was talking to you, he's always enthusiastic and speak really fast and says a lot of things and whatever is thinking in his mind, and comes up with a lot of new ideas, different ways of doing things to move the project forward. And I can understand why many people in the past will get something like that. Is, oh my God, now he's angry, or he's not happy, he wants us to change again.
Then, may I ask where your team was located?
In Cambridge. So a very British team. then I also, whilst getting to know the person, I realized that he talks about his kids with the same intensity. He's got two lovely daughters, and actually even met one. And yeah, the way he describes them, he absolutely love his kids, but he talks about his kids with the same passion, the same speed, the same pace. And I just, this is really an eye-opener, especially when I had to use that example to get my team to understand and start asking questions rather than take, someone is frustrated and we are not really understanding each other. Whenever you are in a position of conflict, I think this is where it's really, really important to take culture as well into consideration. So whether in the past it was when the stakeholder will scream or say what he will say, we will change direction, and then it causes even more problem for us. Whereas for now, just asking a question, just showing the importance, because when I ask him, do you really want us to change? He's like, oh, but you're the expert. I'm just giving you ideas, if you don't think this is fine, just tell me. Because he wasn't really attached to many of the things that he was suggesting. He was just wanted to be involved and share, that's kind of the way they talk whenever, especially in Spain, right? It's very, very, it's common to interrupt each other. Whereas in the British culture, though, it's very different. People are less likely to interrupt each other. And when you raise the tone of your voice, it's usually seen as an argument, and people don't really know how to react to that. And another case, which didn't happen to me personally, it was a friend of mine mentioned how within a company, one Italian woman went to another person from a different background as well and told them, she said, you know what, when you work with British people, especially when they speak so quietly, we need to slow down and listen, because they feel like we are quite aggressive and that we never listen to them, because every time they give us their ideas, they haven't finished talking. Because of how fast we speak, we thought that they're finished and we're coming up with ideas. So within the company, there was always a bit of a conflict between the two individuals. But it turns out that the root cause was actually a lack of understanding of the different culture. On the surface, I mean, actually deep down, when you look at the roots, the two sides wanted exactly the same thing for the projects to go ahead or whatever they work on, and to have a good relationship with each other. But because they never talked about cultural differences, they never acknowledged that the way I might talk to you or the way we get the information is different, then there is always this assumption of something wrong is being done here, and that affects the relationship within the team as well.
Yes. I think those two examples really highlight the core of it all, right?
Yeah.
That if you work cross-culture, it can be national cultures, ethnicity, but it can also be different cultures of different age groups, right? So millennials and people who are in their 50s, for example.
Yeah.
But let's stick to these examples. Here, they hadn't really discussed, in the first case, you hadn't really deciphered yet how different communication patterns can be, right? And that is a huge cultural difference that exists all over the world. So the directness and the indirectness, or the level of drama you put into statements, whereas some people, especially the British culture, prefer a more neutral tone, and that can create a lot of misunderstandings. And luckily, you had this eye-opening event when your colleague or your supplier started speaking about his family, and you realized, oh, he's like that, even on a topic where I am 100% certain that there is a lot of love and passion here and no negative thoughts.
Yeah.
So this isn't actually aggressiveness that's coming out. It's just the way he talks. Yeah. And once you knew that, you knew how to ask the right questions and also how to mediate with the team. And the same goes for the other lady you described. She had probably had that realization at some point in the other direction, right? That she needs to calm down, lower her voice a bit when she's talking to her British counterparts. And this is really essential. One challenge, because you asked me about challenges in the very beginning, right? One challenge we encounter here is finding the right balance between getting to know the other culture, just like you explained in those two examples. So getting a really good grip of how people tick here and there, and
Yeah,
what the differences are, but then also refraining from going into stereotyping. So
definitely.
that is something that as human beings, we do that quite naturally because we need to orient ourselves in a very complex world, right? There is so much information that we like to have quick ways of knowing how to react. And what our brain
Yeah.
does, it sorts everybody into boxes.
And in fact, I would also say that there is a place for stereotypes, I think. But the danger is, as you said, is that you are forgetting about the actual individual, and
Yes.
that you are putting everybody in the box because you are from this country, you should be like that. And in fact, it's even more dangerous for people, especially now. There's a lot of people who are from one country and probably live in so many other countries, at which point it's difficult to really know. They have a lot of different identities, and that's what makes them unique and makes them quite rich. And the only aspects where I think it's important to look at culture and I would say stereotypes, although stereotypes usually have a negative connotation, but just a cultural understanding is, if you don't know the person for the first time, and especially when the culture is a little bit far removed from what you know. For example, if you have to fly for the first time for a business meeting in, let's say, in Japan, I would definitely advise that you read up on the culture of Japan and how they do business, because the way they greet each other will be different, the way they address certain topics will be different. And that's not just Japan. Many different countries, certain countries will say no business during whenever we go out for lunch. For example, you know, in the British culture, it's very common to eat and talk about work, or you just eat at your desk. Whenever I go to client site at lunchtime, they're like, off we go. And I'm like, well, I actually want to do an email, but I go because, you know, it's part of the culture, and I respect that. And that's why it's really important. But when it becomes negative, though, is when you are taking away from the richness of other people, people's culture. And again, it goes back to one of the questions that we were discussing earlier, Eva. Are you in or outside of the box, and where do you want to be?
Yes. And I remember us talking as well in one of our first chats when we first got to know each other. We talked about this phenomenon because we are both people that are often associated by others with, you know, where we come from. That's often one of the first questions, right? Where do you come from? Okay, so that's how you are. And then with both of us growing up partly in other cultures from our homes, we obviously became influenced by those other cultures, and that's not often seen. And then we're stuck in that original box of where we come from, but actually we feel that our culture is much different from that.
Exactly.
And then the inverse can happen as well. Remember when then come back home and people say, yeah, well, but you're not like us anymore. So there is always this balance to strike of you know, knowing about another culture, but always giving the individual that you meet that space to actually be themselves, show themselves the way they are. I always find that the best way is to ask, you know, can you just tell me what you think about yourself and how you see yourself?
Exactly.
You know, that's a question we ask. We ask, where do you come from? And then we assume a lot of things instead of just, people will tell you what they think makes them up.
Because I think people are a bit scared about discussing those topics openly, you know, which I think is a bit of a mistake, because then you are not really embracing who the other person is, especially if you start looking in the point of view of if you're working in an environment or in a country where your town is not really multicultural, and now suddenly you are opened up and asked to have to discuss and work with people from different culture, and it can be a little bit difficult to know what to do. And again, as you said, Eva, opening up conversation, don't make it taboo to talk about personality types, about culture. It's really, really important. And just going back to what you said earlier, I always struggle with comments such as, you are not Chinese enough, you are not British enough, you are not German enough, or you're not African enough, and all of that. because what does it actually mean to be enough? And rather than, you know, using those kind of phrases, which I found them to have some kind of negative connotation, because
Yes.
it's a bit like you are denying some part of my own culture, but at the same time, my culture has also evolved because I assimilated different cultures and I made it my own. So therefore, it's really, really important to avoid using the word enough. And just as another example of something we talked about as well, is that you hear those terms such as oreo or coconut, and that would be, oh, okay, you are a black person who behave like a white person. So you're black on the outside and white in the inside. And I found that's something that you hear, I heard quite a lot. And I absolutely hated that, because then it's kind of, you are making me sound like someone that I'm not. And you are also, by just using that statement, for me, I found that there's a lot of negative stereotypes that's hidden on the both part of the Oreo biscuits
on
that you are
both
putting
sides.
on my
Yes. It actually, it denies the positivity that you bring along, you know, and it fills this need to still classify you as something. Right, but it predefines that, okay, so you're black on the outside and white on the inside. Why don't you get to decide which parts you are and where? You know, that is just, it's awful. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say, again, it goes back to what you talked about, the integration paradigm. And obviously the differentiation was that to be careful about kind of using the culture in a negative way, but within the integration is about celebrating the other people's culture and celebrating what people bring within your company. And even more importantly, I just want to stress back to what we said at the beginning of this video, is if you want to build a high-performing, diverse workplace, the question is why? Why do you want to build it, right?
Yes, exactly. The question is why, and that's obviously because everybody brings something to the table. Right? And that's, for me, what celebrating diversity means, is really assessing, okay, what positive thing, what competence do you bring to my desk or to our common desk, right?
Yeah.
There might be just very different perspectives, different life experiences, different ways of finding solutions.
Yes.
And that all of that is positive. So you need to really refocus on the positive, and then you know why you want a diverse workforce.
Exactly.
Performance is better, staff retention is better in those organizations that score high on inclusiveness. That is a well-researched topic nowadays, but it's easily forgotten, of course. A last thing that I think would be nice for our viewers is, what lessons do we want to give them around this topic today? Naili, for you, what are the most important things people need to take away from today's video?
For me, I would say definitely celebrate the people's culture and make it not taboo to talk about it, really. Everybody brings something, and for people to be appreciated, it has to be okay for them to come in with their 100%. And you cannot say, leave who you are, leave your culture at the door. Of course, you have a culture as a company, as a country, but the richness that the person also brings is something to be celebrated and valued. And by celebrating and talking about culture, the most important thing that will help within your organization, either for yourself or with your clients, is to avoid arguments or conflicts or negative conflicts that are based on judgment, stereotypes, and preconceived ideas based on people's action, because maybe you simply didn't know that, as I said with the example I gave before, right? So my advice in short is celebrate, and invest the time in understanding the different cultures that you work with.
Yes, I agree with you. That is the key lesson. Invest that time, do that little effort of getting to know the culture, and then also getting to know the individual, because just like you saw in the example, sometimes via, when you check how an individual acts in different spaces of their life, then you can actually derive something about them or their culture, right?
Exactly.
And not just see them in this one little situation, which is just a part of who they are and how they are and how they behave. It's much easier to classify that. And I would add, learn to juggle, learn to dance, gain some flexibility. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is really learn up on the culture, get your facts straight, but then also always dance with that individual. Give them the space that they might not, that they might be outliers. You know, so if we have a bell curve and the mainstream of people in that country behave, you know, like the high part of the bell curve, you have some that are different here, some that are different there, and that might be exactly the person you're working with. So just know your facts, get your facts straight, invest time in getting to know the culture, but then invest some more time in getting to know the individual, not putting them in boxes. Not giving them condescending names that they might really not appreciate, that might hurt them, and create conflict, you know?
Yeah, well, you heard it first here. Learn to celebrate and dance. That's all you need, really, for it to create a great culture. Now, listen, thanks, Eva, for this wonderful discussion. I'm sure that we have plenty to say on this topic, and if you are interested in finding out
for hours, but
likewise,
half an hour.
And so, if you watching us are interested to finding out more, then please find out more information about us within the short notes on YouTube, and feel free to ask us questions, the comment section, and also follow us on LinkedIn. We are always ready and happy to answer any question you have on how to build a fun, inclusive, and high performing workplace.